Hello, my name is Nafisa. I'm the co-executive director of the Sustainability Committee with Purdue Student Government. And today, Dr. Payne will share some of her great sustainable knowledge with us. Dr. Payne is this year's recipient of the Society of Environmental and Ecological Engineering Instructional Excellence Award. And she's the chair of the Go Greener Commission in town. And she does a lot of amazing sustainability related work on campus. And so she's a great source for anything regarding sustainability. So Dr. Payne, whenever you want. Sorry about that.
Hey! All right, thank you, Nafisa. I appreciate it. And hello, everyone. So I like to sort of say I'm a little troublemaker about sustainability. As I get older, I've learned I have to be a little quieter in some ways because you might lose my job, but I still like to stir the pot. So I wanted to kind of tell you guys a little bit about myself, just so you know where I come from and kind of the grounding that I bring to this conversation. And then I'm going to talk about everything from COVID-19 to some projects that have been going on in the community, and then maybe offer some suggestions for you as leaders in sustainability. So just to start off, I was born and raised in Bringhurst, Indiana, which is a very rural town. Lots of CAFOs and no public transportation. When you think of green, it wasn't because we were talking about hugging trees, we were talking about the cornfields, right? So I also got to spend a lot of time in the outdoors, and I loved kayaking and canoeing on the Wildcat Creek, but I was definitely the black sheep in the family when it came to thinking and talking about these kinds of issues. I got older, I went to college, majored in biology. I worked in some labs on carbon sequestration, worked with nonprofits on single-use throwaway plastic campaigns, taught high school environmental science. And then right now, I'm here at Purdue. So I've come a long way, and I've learned kind of some languages to use and some, I guess I would say, tips on how to collaborate as you go. But I'd like to learn a little bit about you guys too before I just kind of talk at you for about 10 minutes. So would you mind either tossing into the chat a little bit about your background, your connection to sustainability, or even just sharing out? So if you're willing to raise your hand or even unmute yourself and share, that would be fantastic too. Be all about that. And I'd love to see your faces if you could turn your video on, but if you can't, I'm okay with that too.
I'm Mia. As a freshman, I joined Purdue Student Sustainability Council, and now I'm on Purdue Student Government, and I'm co-executive director of the Sustainability Committee, and I feel like I've always just been really passionate about it, and I kind of grew up in a very green household, so that's kind of where I got my start, I guess.
All right, thank you, Mia.
Hi, I'm Shruti. I'm representing Purdue Team in Global Health. I'm a senior in bioengineering. So for me, my whole family's, I'm from a family of engineers who've all been working in renewable energy in that field, the energy field. So that's kind of how I got introduced to sustainability and everything. A lot of just my normal practice is very much, I guess, considered sustainable practices. That was just how I was brought up as well. So I'm excited to hear about other things I can do and things I can implement with my student org and stuff like that.
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
Hey, is it working?
Yeah,
Okay.
I can hear you.
Hello, my name is Pratham. I'm a sophomore studying microbiology, and I'm the vice president of the Undergraduate Research Society at Purdue. And a lot of my, I guess, day-to-day tasks surround listening to researchers and learning about, what they're doing to further the body of knowledge. And a lot of times I listen to researchers on different sort of environmental topics that they're tackling, how to make batteries more efficient or versus making the local ponds and the marshland environments plastic-free and different ways to work on that. So yeah, sustainability is also pretty prominent in what I do.
Okay, thank you. Any others? Maybe a couple more? Oh yeah, go ahead, Jenna, sorry.
I'm Jenna. I'm a sophomore in biological engineering, and so what I really want, I'm very, very passionate about the environment, and I really want to work with bioenergy or maybe food scarcity or, you know, plastic alternatives, anything. I don't really care, but I just want to do something with the environment.
All right, thank you. One more maybe? You guys are great. You're all sharing. I love it.
Unless someone else wants to jump in.
Go ahead.
Hi, sorry, I am in my jersey. I just finished working out.
It's okay. My hair's wet. I just took a shower.
But I'm the rising senior. Sorry, I'm a rising senior in computer animation visual effects. I'm representing Women in Animation, WIA, and I've always been super passionate about like taking care of the earth and like recycling and all that stuff. I'm from Atlanta, so we try and do as much of that as possible. But I would like to learn more about how my organization can contribute, or at least, you know, reduce the amount of waste that we can deal out in some better sustainable options. So I'm here to learn about that.
Okay. All right. Well, I think I'm going to kind of switch up some of the things I'm going to talk about just based on what I'm hearing from you guys. So bear with me here a little bit, but I wanted to kind of start by talking about COVID. And I wanted to do that one because I think it's on the foremost of everyone's mind, right? And there's been a lot of analysis around what happened and what's happening. And I read an article the other day and it resonated with me because I think it's so connected to sustainability. So we all know that, you know, the US is struggling, to say the least. You know, we've had a severe sustained outbreak for 4 months. That's no joke. And I believe we have 22% of coronavirus deaths globally, which is insane to me. And you know, even if you don't know people that, you know, are dying from it or have really been severely impacted, even those that aren't you're still experiencing problems, right? Challenges. And you know, I think we also need to acknowledge that the toll of the virus has also been very disproportionate, right? So poorer people, minority groups have you know, been really greatly impacted by this. I think I saw a statistic the other day that Black and Latino residents of the US have contracted the virus at roughly 3 times the rate as white residents. And that's no joke, right? So what I really was interested in is, why is this happening, right? And I read something in the New York Times where they interviewed scientists and public health experts to try and get at the bottom of like what's happening. And I think we can talk ad nauseum about what we think is causing it, but you know, really these 2 central themes came from these interviews. And one of them is, you know, poor federal leadership. Okay, we can acknowledge that. But the one that really I think stuck out to me, and I think is perhaps one of the most interesting things to talk about in relation to sustainability is the cultural norms that we have in the US. So we have this tradition of prioritizing individualism over government restrictions, right? And that tradition has really exacerbated a lot of things. You know, for example, unequal access to healthcare systems. And with the COVID challenges, it's led to inadequate lockdowns. We've had inconsistent policies on mask wearing, and that's really this piece of collective action is what I really want to kind of think about, because you look at other countries that have done it well. So I look at Germany, for example, and one of the addresses that Chancellor Merkel gave not too long ago was that this is serious, take it serious. There's been no other challenge in our country which depends as strongly on our common solidary action. And again, that's collective action, right? And we're seeing a decrease in cases and sort of this like plateau in these kinds of countries. So how does it relate to sustainability being a lone nut, right? Well, I think of collective action as being one of the linchpins that you need for any kind of sustainability action. And I read a book a long time ago by Colin Bevan, which is called No Impact Man. And it was really an interesting read. This guy spent an entire year trying to have no impact, right? And there's a lot of quotes in the book that I think are really relevant to this idea of individual action and collective action. So I'm going to read some of them as I kind of go. But you know, right now we have this mantra of working ahead, consuming, and we don't often think about those consequences, right? And I'd like to say, well, what if we flipped the narrative, right? And we thought about things differently. So for example, you know, what if we treated the resources that pass through our hands as precious and might we also then feel that life is precious, right? But what instead, if it was just me, it was a we thing? By this, I mean, if we as a culture treated resources as precious, might we not begin to act and feel as though life we lead together might be precious too? And I say this because now that I've put the trash in the hall, now the trash is out of my house, it's no longer an I problem, it's a we problem. Something we deal with together. We will together injure our lungs as we inhale the diesel particulates produced as American trucks drive literally millions of miles to move our waste. We'll together drink the water laced with battery acid that's leaked from landfills. We'll together suffer the greater chance of cancer as we breathe in the dioxins produced by incinerators. Now that I've disposed of my throwaway products, you see my convenience has become the entire race's inconvenience. So it's like this individual action is actually a huge collective problem that we don't often really think about or deal with. So I want to think about the positives. So I put together just a few slides of what I'm calling positive things. And I will show them here so that will hopefully inspire you to get some action in your world and in sustainability. So can you all see? I can get it to show. Oh no, my slides are a little, go back to this one. Okay, can you all see my slides? Yes, okay. So I want us to imagine if we had a culture defined by sustainability and collective action, and our culture operated for this balance of environmental, social, and economic spheres, right? And there's some examples that I'm going to share that I think really do this. So imagine if there was a potential to make our river, which is the Wabash River, cleaner and healthier. And imagine if 2,000 residents in Tippecanoe County, motivated by individual advocates and nonprofit employees, so these were individuals that started this movement, installed rain barrels, and these rain barrels diverted stormwater from stormwater drains and ultimately helped keep the Wabash River healthier, right? They keep things out like phosphorus, nitrogen, sediment that pollute our river. Those 2,000 barrels hold an average of 1,300 gallons of stormwater a year, which collectively diverts 2.5 million gallons from the river a year. That's not insignificant, right? Now, it's not huge, but it's not an insignificant amount. And again, this goes back to there was these few individuals that were passionate about doing something about the river, and through a variety of partnership formations with Purdue researchers, with students, with community members, they were able to encourage and spread the adoption of these techniques that have ultimately impacted the river. Related to the river, what if you had a group of Purdue students that collaborated with faculty, staff, and local nonprofits and co-designed and co-installed urban water projects? I'm talking about rain gardens, native savannas, and bioswales. And they did this in the community, and while doing so, over the last 6 semesters, they've engaged 600 volunteers and 100 different Purdue students. Collectively, again, if you think about these projects as a whole, individually, they're not that big of a deal, but collectively, they do a lot. We're talking about diverting, 3 million gallons of stormwater from the Wabash River every year, which keeps it ultimately healthier. And really going back to these are all individual actions that have scaled up and collectively do make a difference. The other example that I've really been deeply connected to is around climate action. So this, what if we could address climate change, right? Reduce our emissions, mitigate some of the adverse impacts for the most vulnerable populations and for those that aren't the most vulnerable. Here locally, and I think you could say across the world, we've had, one voice. It became 2, and then many voices started calling for more action. And those voices were all youth, right? I mean, there have been a lot of adults in my generation and older that have failed miserably at doing something about this, but we've seen the youth stand up and start calling for action. This really made a difference locally because they were organized and coordinated. And what we were starting to see was that the West Lafayette High School students, in partnership with Purdue students, started to have their voices heard. And we had elected officials, the mayor of West Lafayette, passed a resolution calling for climate action. We've had a greenhouse gas inventory conducted for both the city-operated entities and the community at large. Organizations across the region are joining in this effort. We have Purdue students, we have faculty, we have the Go Greener Commission, we have elected officials. Everyone is starting to come together and partner around these issues. And very most recently, both mayors and 3 county commissioners have come together and had a conversation about developing a regional climate mitigation and adaptation plan, which is huge. Now we have to get Purdue on board, and that's where the students again have come back to the forefront, put forth a letter to President Daniels and ask for him to participate in this effort and consider carbon neutrality as well. So this is a movement that's growing and is continuing to be fostered and supported through a collective action type effort. So I think those are 2 really good local examples, and I'm happy to pick them apart more for you in terms of specific questions you might have on how we made them work, because I think it was definitely a collective we. But I do have a few what I call kind of key concepts to remember as you think about organizing and leadership around these spaces. So when I think of inspiring collective action, I think of 6 things. I think 1, you have to be purpose driven. You really have to make sure that you are harnessing energy around a cause and you're not drifting from your mission. So your cause may be single-use plastic, or your cause may be climate change, or it may be bioengineering something, right? But you need to stay focused in that effort. And then also I think it's important to make sure that your membership and those that are closely linked to the cause also keep their focus too. So you have a purpose and you keep your focus. Another thing to really think about is being deliberate in your decisions around, community and culture. So think about the context in which you're operating, right? If I was to go back home to my hometown in Indiana and say that I wanted to do a climate adaptation plan and I'm going to expect the city council to pass a carbon neutrality pledge, I am insane, right? Because my context is not ready for that. They would be ready for me to sit down and talk about things in a different way and to think about, okay, farmers, how are you being impacted by climate change? So really being aware of the culture and the context in which you are crafting your decisions is really, really critical. And you also have to be patient in these spaces, because lots of times action does not happen quickly, as you all are learning, I'm sure. Another thing to think about is empowering your members. One of the failures I think a lot of people have when they are in leadership positions is they don't give their membership or their volunteers anything to do. So they have all these great ideas, but they keep it all in their brain, or they do it all themselves, and they forget that if they really want to have followers or people involved in this collective action space, they've got to give people clear tasks. So really think about that as you're working with your constituents and you're working with your membership. How do you give them clear tasks so that they feel involved and empowered in the cause that you're working on? Another thing to think about is tools and strategies that support community. So we are in a very unique space, right? I mean, and this is a time in which we will definitely look back and say pre and post COVID, this will be forever written in history. And it is drastically changing how we create community. No longer can we go sit on our front porch and converse with our neighbors comfortably. I mean, we have to really think about intentional social distancing, and we can't just jump into the classroom and have these small discussion spaces. So thinking about how you're going to continue to support and create community is really going to be a challenge right now. And I would certainly welcome your ideas, because I'm really struggling with this personally, and having to think about keeping our climate action efforts going. So this will be something I'd like to talk about kind of at the end as well. And then lastly, I think one of the things that I feel like we often do, adults, children, senior citizens are all at fault of this, is we don't think about leveraging and collaborating with our networks. So if, for example, in this climate action space, if the Purdue students weren't connected with myself and the elected officials, we wouldn't be essentially fighting or pursuing the same goals, right? Because we'd all want something different. But since we're collaborating, we're trying to speak a common language, and we're going to have more of a reach, because I have my own network, the students have their own network, the elected officials have their network, and we're going to have a broader reach because we've really thought intentionally about how we can work together in this collaborative space. So those are just some key things that I really think about and come to mind when I think about collective action and trying to coordinate and be effective as leaders. And the last thing, to bring it back to COVID, this is why I find all of this so fascinating, is that the leadership styles that have come out of this COVID crisis are so applicable to sustainable action right now. So there are some leaders that have really nailed it. And the research has shown that there are some key aspects of leadership that really make a difference. One of them is clear direction giving. So wear your mask. That's a good example, right? Meaning making. Wear your mask to save lives. So you've given a directive and you've told them why to do it. You've given it meaning. And then empathy. This is, like I listen, I acknowledge, I understand. And, these are really key characteristics that I think we should all consider as we think about sustainability challenges, because, COVID is a sustainability challenge in its essence. And then I think also this idea of persuading the collective to take responsibility for collective problems. So again, how do you get people to think about the common good, about spaces that aren't theirs in terms of ownership, but are theirs in which they are impacting? And I think, New Zealand's prime minister is a perfect example of what's working well in their country. She gave orders of stay home to save lives. And again, that goes back to very clear directions and meaning making. She's been freely acknowledging the challenges in a very open space, crafting empathy, saying, I understand staying home is hard, things like that. She also spends lots of times with her constituents, answering questions. I think that's another really important trait to do, is to engage. And it's time consuming, it's exhausting, but if you really want to make a difference, you've got to be willing to spend the time. And then the last thing that I think really is important too is to be transparent in your decision making. You don't have to invite people to your meetings, but you need to give them reason and explanation for why you've made the decisions that you're making. So those are just some lessons and some things that I think about a lot when I think about sustainability and I think about the challenges of sustainability. And I guess I want to leave you with this one quote that I really like, and then I'm going to open it up for conversations and breakout rooms so we can talk a little more freely. We know that we have to change the system, but we must also remember that the system is only a collection of individuals. What the system does is just the aggregation of all our individual actions as citizens, shareholders, CEOs, product designers, customers, friends, family members, and voters. We have to stop waiting for the system to change and remember that every decision we make in our homes and in our workplace amounts to the system. All right, so I'm going to leave you with that, and I'm going to give you the option here because we don't have a huge group of people. Do you guys want to do breakout rooms, or do you want to just have one big, large group discussion? Thoughts, feedback? What do you prefer?
Just one big discussion.
Oh, okay. All right, we got to vote. We're going with it. Okay, so my questions for you all then. I really want to know, one is, now that we've kind of talked a little bit about actions, I guess fundamentally, like, what do you think you will individually do to inspire collective action? What are the thoughts that are rattling around in your head right now, or questions that you might even have?
A question that I have, if that's okay to start with.
Yes, go ahead.
Is in terms of giving people things to do, right? We talked with Michael Gulich and a few other people about like sustainability initiatives that have been here. So for example, at the tailgating, the recycling program,
Yep.
or with picking up recycling from fraternities and sororities, and like things that we want to re-implement as a student government. But then he talked about, well, it got hard to recruit people, and so what happens if there's things to do, but how do you get people to be actively engaged in what you have?
Yeah, I think we found, I use the FNL program, the Friday Night Lights program, as the example that I'm most like intimately knowledgeable about. And I think that the challenges that you have is you've got to, how do I want to put this? You have to have a small time commitment for people. And it almost needs to be a consistent one. So I think where FNL is brilliant in its functionality is that it's a short, continued time commitment. So it's every Friday night. It's maybe an hour. I don't know. I haven't done it in a couple of years, so I'm not sure if it's different. Tell me. But it's really short and it's social, right? Some of these other commitments, like the tailgate recycling, that's an all-day affair. That's a lot. And now, so you could think about shifts for things like that, but I really think strategically, if you want people to commit, everybody's busy, and as the semester goes on, we all acknowledge we get busier and busier and busier. So I think those like short snippet programs and really, you know, I think there's a lot of other flaws. Is this still being recorded, Nathan? Can I talk freely? Yes, it is. I think there's some flaws in the administration in terms of how they support our sustainability programs, which then ultimately provide some challenges for getting volunteers to be consistent and showing up every time. So in many ways, it's better for the students to have total control of their program. I don't know, did I answer your question at all?
Yeah, no, very helpful. Thank
Okay.
you.
And I will say too, I think as much as I know students want to make a difference on their own campus, it is probably one of the more challenging spaces to make a difference because there's so many layers of bureaucracy you have to work through that to see that difference and that change in your time frame on campus is going to be really challenging. So if you're willing to start the effort, just accept the fact you may not see it end, but it's going to end eventually. It just may not be you crossing that finish line. Communities are easier. They're more open. What else do you guys have questions about?
I think an idea for helping people to understand their role in collective action is to kind of expose the bigger picture, I guess. Like, I know there are a lot of resources and things coming out about, like, recycling, for example, and how it's not as great as we think it is, but maybe just giving people that information in a very direct way and telling them that them putting something in the recycling bin isn't, you know, the end of it, and that I think we kind of have this mentality around recycling where, like, you know, pat yourself on the back for recycling, you're doing such a great thing, and that's all you have to do. So I think just giving people like direct information about how their individual actions actually do come into the bigger picture, I guess.
And I think to piggyback on that, you know, it's also linking it to their personal context. So, you know, my parents, I'll take my parents, for example, you know, they didn't recycle always. I mean, I had to work on them to recycle. And it wasn't about saving the earth. It was about the fact that they're, you know, but mom and dad, it's about me and it's about my future. You know, my brother doesn't recycle, but now that he has a kid, he thinks about it more. So it's like knowing the context in which you're crafting those messages, I think is really important. And that's hard to do, but I also just love the fact that we've forgotten the reduce, reuse part, and we just go straight to the recycle. Like, it's reduce, reuse, recycle. But yeah, recycling's in a really bad state right now, and I don't think it's going to get better anytime soon. So that patting yourself on the back is, it's a really bad thing. Yeah.
I also kind of had like a question / comment about so I've taken a couple of environmental policy classes that I've learned a lot, but something that kind of came up in one of my more senior classes was, again, the idea of collective action, but I guess in a more large scale, that individual action isn't actually all that useful. You know, there's more cynicism to it than I think I was hoping for. I understand, and, you know, like recycling or using a metal straw and all this stuff, like, okay, yeah, it does some good, but if, you know, if it's only just you out of like 1,000 people, it doesn't really do anything. So I guess something that like I've tried to do is almost incentivize it, some sustainable practices, but I guess I was wondering what your thoughts are on that. But then also, if you don't mind, I guess the idea of recycling to me seems very Western in a way, because the way I grew up, we don't call it recycling, we just call it being practical, using the same like container over again. Like, why go use something else like when you already have it? just use the bag you already have. Why are you going out of your way and getting something new? Like, it's just common sense for a lot of us. But kind of growing up, I've also seen it be like the green triangle and reduce, reuse, recycle. I'm like, I didn't know there's a term for this.
Yeah. No, it's culturally, it's a really fascinating, like if you dig into the history of single-use things, we had, people did, like you said, people were used. I mean, my grandparents, they were the king and queen of reduce and reuse. Like they never threw anything away. But we went through this depression, and then society, we had the world wars, and then there was this huge discovery of plastic, right? And there were marketing campaigns. I mean, there is a Life magazine cover of this woman throwing up single-use plastics and saying, it's a throwaway society. And it's gut-wrenching, but it's truly this culture of single use, and has been beat into our heads here in the US. And it's awful. It is awful. So I think it's very distinctly different than other countries, which is a shame, but it can be changed. So to your point of this individual versus collective, yes, it is cynics. And I will say, like, at the large scale, fine. I will agree, but where I always come back to is, but I don't operate at the global scale. I operate in my backyard, and I can see the difference in my community when I have collective action here. And so that's what I encourage people to think that way, because I feel like you can have an impact with you can go talk to your city council person. You're not going to talk to the UN representatives, or you're not going to talk to the president of the United States, but you can make action in your own backyard that is going to be visible. And I would like to think that we see this with climate action, that if you get enough cities across the nation, eventually we're going to start seeing that larger scale collective action happening. It's going to take a long time, and it may be too late when it happens, but we are starting to see it, which I think is encouraging, at least in that sphere. But it's a really good point that you bring up, and those upper level policy classes. Other thoughts or questions, ideas?
Put a question in chat.
I just saw, yes, okay, which is better? Okay, which is better, or at least more practical? Small group of people doing small projects that have individually a very small impact, but together have a bigger result, or people organizing in a larger group to do a larger project that individually have a bigger impact, but less of a big total result. To put this into a metaphor, possibly easy to understand, which is better, 1 + 1 + 1 + 1 = 6, or 3 + 3 = 6. I don't know that I think, so it's a really good question. I think it depends on the way I think of these things is, when you do these kinds of projects and these kinds of efforts, one of the kind of strategy to doing it is to think about how you can impact or reach the most people. So I don't know that there's a nuanced difference, but my vote would go for whichever approach was able to reach and diffuse the information the most. So if you had, a bigger project, but you only had 2 people involved, to me, that might not be as impactful as 3 smaller projects with 6 people involved in each one, because each one of those individuals is going to go out and hopefully share, spread, diffuse their knowledge and their information that they shared. So it's not just about, in my opinion, the impact of the environmental project, but also the social diffusion of the efforts that they've been doing. Does that answer your question, Jared?
Yes, somewhat. Mainly, I was just trying to get at, like, is it better to have, like, say, groups of 2s, just do small projects, or to have, like, a group of 10 people organized together and do, like, a big project?
I mean, it depends on if you're coordinating all of them. If you're overseeing the small projects, then I would maybe go for 1. So you're coordinating just 1 project. But, I think you just kind of have to think about how you're going to spread that information as well, in terms of, diffusing it. It's not just about that environmental impact. And do you have a specific example that you're referring to?
Really, I was just trying to get a general idea.
Okay.
Thank you.
You're welcome. There's some other questions in here too. Let's see. I don't think I have any other questions. Any other questions?
I have a question. So how do you think the best way to change, like, not the preconceived notions that people have about sustainability, but like kind of how people see environmentally friendly people or like environmentally friendly ideas or concepts, like automatically most people I talk to, maybe it's the way I talk about it, just kind of get defensive, and they feel like I'm judging the way they're living, when I'm just really like, no, like this is gonna benefit you on the long term too. Like this is not just about you, like it's about, you know, it's about all of us. But like I feel like there's always this barrier initially that I absolutely do not want, and I feel like, I don't know if it's me or if it's them, but I don't know how's the best way to kind of like deal with that, you know?
That's a tough question. I've been there many times. I don't know that I have a good answer. I go back to kind of this idea of, again, knowing your audience. And I know there is research out there on how to talk about these issues. So, for example, there is a whole communication guide on climate change, how you should talk about these issues around climate change and the language you should use so that it isn't, you know, offensive, abrasive, and acknowledges various ideologies. So I'm sure there's research out there on various topics and issues. But I think it's kind of, it's knowing your audience, and it's knowing where to enter the conversation. And that's a really hard thing to figure out, especially if you don't know your audience very well, right? So it's easier for me if I was going to go talk to a farmer, for example, and I wanted to talk about climate change. At least I understand where that farmer's coming from, and I can enter into the conversation around weather changes and your crop yields, and then get to those spaces that are a little more difficult, right? But if I was going to talk to, let's say, a CEO of a company, it would be harder for me to enter into those conversations because I don't have that background and I don't have that understanding. So it's tough. And even with your family, I think you'll probably find, I don't know, with mine, not some of the hardest conversations to have at all is with your family members around these topics, and you know them really well. But I don't know if I have a good answer. Have any of you been successful in doing these sorts of dialogue conversations? I'd really be interested to hear if anybody's had good luck.
My mom has always been a big proponent of what she calls the slow turn, which is when somebody who might have a very differing viewpoint than you on something like climate change, to kind of like not overwhelm them all at once with all of the, well, this could happen, like, you know, like you need to do this because it's the right thing to do. Like, and you need to kind of like come at it from a more empathetic, not saying you weren't being empathetic, just like you need to come at it from a more like, okay, this is a lot of information to handle. And so like you kind of gotta like take your time with it almost, because like, you know, obviously it to happen immediately, but I know I have a tendency to like, I'm trying to get better at this, but like I have a tendency to like talk until someone agrees with me. So I've been trying to get better at that, especially when talking about like sustainability or any other topic like that people debate on a lot. But I've always found that it's like good to do the slow turn, which is kind of like build up and like a little bit at a time. Show them what you're doing instead of making them feel like they're doing something wrong, like you said.
I like that. I think that's I like that slow turn. I'm going to use that. I'm going to use that a lot. Mark me now, because I have a lot of conversations I need to enter into, and I'm going to actually use that for students and say, it's the slow turn. M credit, slow turn. That's what we're going to do. But, and I think too, it's like also, you know, you have to have a willingness and patience to continue to have those conversations, probably repeatedly, because you're not going to, I mean, there's also a lot of research out there, depressingly so, that, you know, your ideology doesn't change. And so if you may think, especially with climate change, if you think this way, we're brought up this way, this is where the ideal lines you follow along, you're not going to change your mind about it. So you also have to pick your battles. that's another thing, is pick your battles. I mean, I have a very extended family of very conservative individuals. I picked my battle with my youngest cousin because he was kind of, he seemed impressionable. Well, now we see eye to eye on just about everything. So, you know, it took me a long while to get in there, but hey, I picked my battle. And I didn't try it with the oldest cousin because I knew I wouldn't get anywhere. I was thinking about something else too that I was going to mention. And I don't know a lot of the literature around this, but there has certainly been a lot of work around entering into dialogue around racism and systemic racial injustice. And I have to think that there's some lessons learned in that work that could translate very nicely to these kinds of challenging issues of sustainability, climate change, and those kinds of things. So that might be another area to really explore, because I know it's finally getting the attention that it deserves. And thank you for that guide on the communication guide. I have another one. I just don't think I have it in a link, but I'll try and find it. Other questions or thoughts or comments?
Kind of just adding to the conversation about slow progress, slow change.
Mhm.
So I'm a communication major, so a lot of the things I've learned about is how to persuade people, or at least try to change their actions. So one of the things that I have learned throughout my time is there are different stages of people like trying to just putting the awareness in people's minds and getting people to change their, actually take action and maintain that. And it's from a lot of things I've heard about communication, it's very, very hard to change people's opinions and their actions, but it goes back to how you analyze, as we've talked about, the your public, your audience. So if you can see that maybe people are just aware of what sustainability is, and going from there, start tailoring your how you talk about sustainability and how you talk about disperse information specifically on that one audience that maybe might not know what sustainability is. So you can put that, put that in their heads first. As you analyze if the message has really stuck, then maybe if they are going into the next stage per se, then you can start talking about, it's not just an individual thing, it's also just an impact for the impact in your community, in the whole we perspective. So this is really interesting, just from a communicator's perspective, just due to how do you best, or just how do you get through to an audience.
And you guys certainly, thank you for sharing. You guys certainly could learn a lot from each other interdisciplinarily, right? I mean, just sharing the theories, the foundations of your disciplines with each other can be very effective in motivating people across the spectrum. That's great.
So Dr. Payne, I saw in your PowerPoint that there were students helping out planting, plants in rain gardens. If a student's interested in doing that, how should they do it?
Well, thank you, Nafisa. That's great. So I do teach a class in the spring semester that's called Urban Water Projects, and Nafisa was in the class this past spring, and we collaboratively design these small-scale stormwater management solutions with community partners, and then ultimately install them and hand them off. Now, this semester was slightly unique, so we did not get to actually install 2 of the 3 projects, but the third one did go in, and we have 2 more coming this fall that will need to be installed. So depending upon caveats, the situation in which we will find ourselves in a month, a little over a month from now, There may be potentials for volunteers to get involved if you want to do that. The other opportunity would be to take the class in the spring. And again, caveat, I don't know that it will happen because it is very hands-on and engaged in the community. And I certainly wouldn't want to promise an engaged experience that you can't get. So I'm hoping we can have it. I'm hoping, fingers crossed. Yes.
Where could we learn about, whether or not it's happening or whether or not volunteers are allowed to participate?
I would say if you want to just email me directly, that's probably, I won't know. So if we do the installations, they're going to be mid-September for just the volunteer opportunities. So if you want to get back with me, probably like beginning of September, I'll know by then what we're going to do. You're welcome to email me. I'll put my email in the chat down here and just check in. As far as the class goes, if you are interested, we give priority to Triple E students, but I can add you on a wait list, and that way, if we don't fill up, you can get in. How's that sound? So you could just email me that as well.
Are there other classes?
Oops.
Are there other classes
Sorry.
like that where you can do like community projects and like sustainability stuff?
So has anyone taken any ethics classes and wants to talk about those? Kevin, you want to share a little bit?
Oh, hi. I'm
You
Kevin.
raised your hand.
Oh, sorry. You mentioned ethics. Yeah, I took it for my first year, and they offer a bunch of sub teams that actually enable you to contribute, whether it's through, I think they have a Habitats for Humanity team, an Engineering Without Borders team, and it's not necessarily limited to just engineering majors, because you can help sustainable causes in the US, or if you want to extend that into third world or struggling countries, you can do that, which is what Engineering Without Borders does. So yeah, you have, I think, a bunch of options for that one.
Yeah, that's good. They, I think that the caveat with there is a distinct difference between my class and ethics. At least this is what I'm hearing from students that have done both. Is that in your ethics classes, it's a 1 credit, and you may or may not have as much contact with your community partner as they do in my class. And then you also may or may not actually directly do something. It may be more of kind of a virtual conversation. One of the real, I would say, keystones of my class is that you work with your community partner, and it's your project, and you lead it. And I expect that deep collaboration, not just we're designing and then we show up and say, here you go, hope this works. That doesn't fly with me very well. So that's a difference, I think, between the two. But I don't know. I don't know if like BME does anything like that at all. There used to be, do they still do global design teams? I don't know if they're called global design teams anymore, but.
So I was in the global engineering learning community, and they were supposed to do global design teams second semester, and then something got mixed up with CRNs, and then just never happened.
Oh, okay. Because I know there's a few of those that still function. I think it's called, what is it? What is the program now? Global Engineering, GEPP, I think, is the entity that runs them all. And I don't know, you guys, like with COVID, I don't know what's going to happen. I mean, this could be a rough year for all of us. I don't know if these projects are going to go on. I mean, I know with my community partners, they're really concerned with, presence of people coming back and forth on their sites. And so it's a challenging space to be in. We have time for a couple more questions if you have them. If not, I won't steal more of your time this evening.
Hi, I do have a question.
Okay.
You mentioned that we have a culture that, I guess, forgive me if I'm misinterpreting this, but we have a culture that, I guess, perpetuates individualism, right? Especially in sustainability. So you talked about how individuals can work, but how about methods a collective or an individual can take in, I guess, changing that culture?
Yeah, I think that's the hard part. That's like the $1 million question, Kevin. And I don't have a good answer for that, other than I think that you whittle away a little bit at a time, right? And so I've always felt like it's really smart to find your tribe and your network of the willing that's they're able and wanting to do something. So think about, you know, who are your advocates, who are the people that are interested in these causes, and who can you leverage? And it certainly doesn't just have to be your students, right? This could be, you know, your dad's friend that's in a position as a CEO and has money that could donate to your cause. I mean, you could think really differently about supporting these organizations and causes. And I think it comes down to, again, the hope that, and I know it's kind of Pollyanna of me to say, but the hope that if enough people really come together and you can keep spreading out your message, you can start to see that tipping point and this momentum of change, right? I mean, this is certainly not the 60s, right, where everybody was fired up about everything and we had this huge environmental movement, but why couldn't it be, right? Why couldn't this be your time to be those college students on campus that are really raising a stink? And maybe it's around climate change, right? I mean, this is a prime time. There've been a lot of student organizing. I know Mason Merkel's done a lot to kind of lead that charge. So there's certainly things that you could do to get involved. And there's some clubs, I think, you know, Jared put some clubs in there. There's the Student Sustainability Council and the Faculty Advisor, great group. There's BGI, Engineers Without Borders, ESW. What else do we have? There's a ton of them. Boiler Link has a bunch, right? But there's clubs that certainly you could get involved with. So it's tough. It's a tough question. Final question? Okay, well, I'll say you guys are welcome to email me anytime. I put my email in the chat box, so feel free to reach out. I'm always available. Love to chat with students and inspire and stir up some trouble. So feel free to get in touch.
Thank you so much, Dr. Payne. We really appreciate you being here. And I know everybody here, I learned a lot and really enjoyed this.
All right, well, thank you all for having me. You guys have a wonderful evening.
Thank you.
Bye.